The dust rose in clouds thick enough to choke on, and Amelia Garrett was halfway up the canyon trail when she heard the sound that made every rancher's blood run cold. The thunder of hooves, thousands of them, moving as one terrified mass. She spurred her mare forward, cresting the ridge just in time to see the nightmare unfolding below in the valley outside White Pine, Nevada, where 3 cowboys were desperately trying to turn a stampede of nearly 2,000 head of cattle that had spooked at something and were now barreling straight toward the town. The year was 1883, and Amelia had been riding these trails for 5 years since her father's death, managing their small ranch alone, but she had never seen anything like this. The lead cowboy's horse stumbled, throwing him hard against a boulder, and Amelia's heart seized as she watched him try to stand, clearly dazed and injured, directly in the path of the oncoming stampede. Without thinking, she kicked her mare into a full gallop down the slope, her mind racing faster than her horse's hooves. She would never reach him in time, not to pull him to safety, not with the cattle already bearing down on them both. The other 2 cowboys were screaming, firing their pistols into the air, but the cattle were too far gone in their panic, their eyes rolling white with terror. Amelia did the only thing she could think of. She opened her mouth and sang. The note that came from her throat was pure and clear, cutting through the chaos like a blade through silk. It was an old hymn her mother had taught her, one she had sung to calm nervous horses during storms, to soothe colicky calves, to bring peace to the animals when nothing else would work. Her voice rose higher, stronger, carrying across the valley with a power she had never quite understood but had always possessed. The sound seemed to wrap around the leading steers, and impossibly, miraculously, their pace began to slow. She kept singing, pouring everything she had into the melody, her voice never wavering even as her mare danced nervously beneath her. The words were about green pastures and still waters, about safety and rest, and somehow the cattle heard them. The leaders began to turn, their panic ebbing, and the mass behind them followed suit, the stampede breaking apart into confused clusters of animals that milled about, shaking their heads as if waking from a bad dream. When the last echo of her voice faded, the valley was silent except for the heavy breathing of cattle and horses. Amelia sat frozen in her saddle, her throat raw, her hands trembling on the reins. Below her, the injured cowboy was pushing himself to his feet, staring up at her with an expression she could not quite read. He was tall, even hunched over as he was, with dark hair that fell past his collar and a strong jaw set in a face made handsome by the honest wear of outdoor work. Blood trickled from a cut above his eye, but he seemed oblivious to it. The other 2 cowboys had ridden up to him, but he waved them off, his gaze never leaving Amelia's face. He walked toward her, limping slightly, and when he reached her horse, he looked up at her with eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight, bright amber shot through with gold. Up close, she could see he was perhaps 26 or 27, just a handful of years older than her own 22. "That was the most incredible thing I have ever seen," he said, his voice rough with emotion and dust. "You just saved my life and probably half the town besides. What is your name?" "Amelia Garrett," she managed, her voice still shaky from the singing and the fear that was only now catching up to her. "I have a ranch about 3 miles east of here." "Tanner Zimmerman," he said, and despite the blood on his face and the obvious pain he was in, he smiled at her with such warmth that she felt something shift in her chest. "I work for the Double Bar Ranch. We were moving this herd to the railhead when something spooked them. A rattlesnake, maybe, or a cougar. It happened so fast." One of the other cowboys, a grizzled man with a gray beard, rode up beside them, "Boss, we need to get you to the doctor. That is a nasty cut and you took a hard fall." "In a minute, Charlie," Tanner said, still looking at Amelia. "I need to know how you did that, how you stopped them with just your voice." Amelia shook her head, climbing down from her mare because it seemed rude to keep looking down at him when he was injured. "I do not really know. My mother could do it too. She said it was a gift, that some people just have a way with animals. I have always been able to calm horses and cattle when they get frightened, but I have never tried it on a stampede before. I just knew I had to do something." Tanner reached out and took her hand, and the touch sent a shock through her that had nothing to do with fear or adrenaline. His hand was calloused and warm, strong despite the tremor she could feel running through him. "You are the bravest woman I have ever met. You rode straight toward a stampede when anyone else would have run the other way. You were going to be killed," Amelia said simply. "I could not just let that happen." The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "Marry me," he said suddenly, the words tumbling out as if he had no control over them. Then he laughed a little wildly and shook his head. "I am sorry. I think I hit my head harder than I thought, but I meant it. I know we just met, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life." "Marry me. You are definitely suffering from a head injury," Amelia said, but she was smiling despite herself. "You should let your friend take you to the doctor." "Come with me," Tanner said. "Please, I want to know everything about you. Where you learned to sing like that, how you manage a ranch on your own, what your favorite color is, whether you take sugar in your coffee. I want to know it all." There was something in his voice, a desperate sincerity that made it impossible to say no. Against her better judgment, against every practical thought in her head, Amelia found herself nodding. "All right. But you are getting that cut looked at first, and if the doctor says you have a concussion, we are going to chalk this proposal up to delirium and forget it ever happened." "I am not going to forget it," Tanner said firmly. "Not ever." Charlie and the other cowboy, a younger man named Pete, helped Tanner onto his horse, and the group made their way back to White Pine with the cattle following docilely behind, as calm as if they had never bolted in the first place. Amelia rode beside Tanner, acutely aware of the way he kept glancing at her, as if he was afraid she might disappear if he looked away for too long. White Pine was a small town, just a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, and a handful of other buildings including the doctor's office. News of the stampede had already reached the townspeople, and they came out to stare as the group rode in with Amelia at the center of the attention. She had always been a private person, uncomfortable with scrutiny, and she felt her cheeks burn as people whispered and pointed. The doctor, an older man named Hanson who had treated Amelia for everything from broken fingers to pneumonia over the years, took one look at Tanner and ushered him inside. Amelia followed, ignoring the curious looks from the crowd gathering outside. "Doctor." Hanson cleaned the cut above Tanner's eye with practiced efficiency while asking him a series of questions about his vision, his balance, and whether he felt nauseated. "You are lucky," Dr. Hanson said finally. "It is not a concussion, just a nasty bump and a cut that will leave a small scar. You will be sore for a few days, but there is no serious damage." Tanner looked at Amelia with such triumph that she had to laugh. "So I am not delirious," he said, "which means my proposal stands." Dr. Hanson's eyebrows shot up. "Proposal? You two are engaged?" "Not yet," Amelia said quickly. "He asked, but I have not answered." "Because you think I am crazy," Tanner said. "But I am not. I know what I want." "You do not even know me," Amelia protested, but her heart was beating faster than it should have been, and she could not quite bring herself to meet his eyes. "Then let me get to know you," Tanner said. "Have dinner with me tonight. Let me prove to you that this is not just some wild impulse because I almost died. I have been working cattle drives for 10 years, and I have had plenty of close calls. I have never proposed to anyone before, Doctor. Hanson chuckled as he bandaged Tanner's forehead. Well, this is certainly the most interesting thing to happen in White Pine in quite some time. Amelia, the whole town is going to be talking about this, you know. I am aware, Amelia said dryly. She looked at Tanner, really looked at him, trying to see past the handsome face and the earnest expression to whatever lay beneath. What she saw there made her pulse skip, genuine warmth, intelligence, and something else she could not quite name, but that drew her in like a moth to flame. All right. Dinner, but that is all I am promising. The smile that broke across Tanner's face was like sunrise. That is all I am asking for right now. Charlie poked his head into the office. Boss, we got the herd settled in the holding pens by the rail station. Pete and I can handle them for the night if you want to take care of your business here. Thanks, Charlie, Tanner said. I will be there early tomorrow to help load them onto the train. After Charlie left, Tanner turned back to Amelia. Where would you like to have dinner? The hotel restaurant is decent, or if you would prefer, I could pick up some food and we could have a picnic somewhere quieter. The picnic, Amelia said immediately. I have had enough of people staring for one day. There is a spot by the creek about a mile south of town, Tanner said. It has a stand of cottonwood trees that should be nice in the evening. Would that work? Amelia nodded. I know the place. I will meet you there at sundown. She left before she could second-guess herself, riding back to her ranch in a daze. The adrenaline from the stampede was wearing off, leaving her shaky and exhausted. But underneath, that was a flutter of something that felt dangerously like excitement. She had not felt this way about anyone since before her father died, when she had briefly been courted by a merchant's son from Carson City. That had ended when the young man realized that Amelia had no intention of giving up her ranch to move to the city, and she had told herself she was fine with being alone. But now, with Tanner's amber eyes and earnest proposal fresh in her mind, she wondered if perhaps she had been lying to herself. Her ranch was small but well-maintained. The house her father had built still sturdy despite being 20 years old. She had 6 horses, a handful of cattle, and a small flock of chickens that provided eggs to sell in town. It was not much, but it was hers, and she had fought hard to keep it after her father's death when several neighboring ranchers had tried to buy her out for far less than it was worth. She fed the animals, changed into a clean dress, brushed out her long dark hair and pinned it up, and tried not to think about what she was doing. This was madness. She had known Tanner Zimmerman for less than 3 hours, and already she was getting dressed up to have dinner with him while he talked about marriage. Any sensible woman would have said no and gone home to forget the whole thing. But Amelia had never been entirely sensible, and something about Tanner felt right in a way she could not explain or ignore. She rode back to the creek as the sun was beginning to set, painting the Nevada sky in shades of orange and pink and deep purple. Tanner was already there, sitting on a blanket spread beneath the cottonwoods with a basket beside him. He stood when he saw her, and she noticed he had changed clothes too, trading his dusty work clothes for clean trousers and a dark blue shirt that brought out the color of his eyes. "You came," he said, and there was such relief in his voice that Amelia felt something melt inside her. "I said I would," she replied, dismounting and tying her mare to a tree branch. "What did you bring?" "Fried chicken from the hotel, fresh bread, some cheese, and apple pie," Tanner said, helping her settle onto the blanket. "I was not sure what you liked, so I tried to get a bit of everything." "It all sounds wonderful," Amelia said, and meant it. She could not remember the last time someone had prepared a meal for her. It was always her doing the cooking, eating alone at her small kitchen table. They ate as the sun sank lower, the conversation flowing more easily than Amelia would have thought possible. Tanner told her about growing up in Texas, the son of a rancher who had lost everything when a drought killed their cattle. He had come west at 16 to find work, spending the next decade moving from ranch to ranch, learning the business and saving his money. He had been working at the Double Bar Ranch for 2 years and had just been promoted to foreman, overseeing the cattle drives and the day-to-day operations. "It is good work," he said, "but it is not mine, you know. I have been dreaming of having my own place someday, with enough land to run a decent herd and maybe some horses. I have almost saved enough for a down payment on a property that came up for sale about 10 miles from here. 500 acres with water rights and a small house that needs some fixing up." "That sounds like a good opportunity," Amelia said carefully. "Why have you not bought it yet?" Tanner looked down at his hands. "Because every time I think about doing it, I picture that empty house and wonder what the point is. I have spent so many years working toward this dream, but lately it has started to feel hollow. I want to build something, but I want to build it with someone. I want a partner, a family, a home that is full of life and laughter. I do not want to just exist anymore. I want to live." The raw honesty in his words struck Amelia to her core. "I understand that," she said quietly. "After my father died, I threw myself into keeping the ranch running. It was all I could think about, proving that I could do it alone, that I did not need anyone's help. But there are nights when I sit on my porch and listen to the silence, and I wonder if I have been confusing independence with loneliness." Tanner reached out and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I meant what I said this afternoon. I know it sounds insane, but the moment I saw you riding toward that stampede, singing like some kind of angel, I knew. I have never believed in love at first sight before, but I believe in it now." Amelia's throat tightened. "How can you be sure? What if it was just the danger, the excitement of the moment?" "It was not," Tanner said firmly. "Do you want to know what I was thinking about when my horse threw me? I was thinking that I was going to die without ever finding what I was looking for, without ever meeting someone who made me feel alive. And then you appeared, and I swear to you, Amelia, even with a stampede bearing down on me, all I could think was how beautiful you were, how brave, how perfect." "I am not perfect," Amelia said, but her voice shook. "I am stubborn and independent to a fault. I have a terrible temper when I am crossed. I cannot cook anything fancier than beans and biscuits. I would rather mend a fence than sew a dress." "I love beans and biscuits," Tanner said, and there was such warmth in his smile that Amelia felt tears prick at her eyes. "And I need someone who can mend fences because I am terrible at it. As for stubborn and independent, those are not flaws. They are strengths. You kept your ranch running when everyone told you it was impossible. You rode toward danger to save a stranger. Those are the qualities I admire most." "You are very good at this," Amelia said, trying to lighten the mood before she started crying in earnest. "Did you practice these lines?" "Not once," Tanner said. "This is all improvised, which is terrifying because I have no idea if it is working." "It is working," Amelia admitted. "That is what scares me." They sat in silence for a moment, hands still clasped, the creek burbling softly behind them. The stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, and a cool breeze rustled through the cottonwood leaves. It was peaceful here, removed from the world, and Amelia found herself wishing they could stay in this moment forever. "Tell me about your mother," Tanner said finally. "The one who taught you to sing." Amelia smiled, though it was bittersweet. "She died when I was 12, fever. But before that, she was the strongest person I knew. She had this way with animals, like I told you." She could walk into a corral full of wild horses, and they would calm down just from hearing her voice. She taught me everything she knew. She said it was a gift from her grandmother, who had the same ability. My father used to joke that he married her because she was the only person who could handle his ornery stallion. "She sounds remarkable," Tanner said. "You must miss her." "Every day," Amelia said. "Especially after my father died. He never really recovered from losing her. He kept the ranch going, but his heart was not in it anymore. When the fever took him 5 years ago, part of me was almost glad because I knew he would be with her again." "And you have been alone ever since," Tanner said, and it was not a question. "Yes. There have been men who have shown interest, but they always wanted me to give up the ranch. They wanted a wife who would stay home and keep house, not one who would ride out at dawn to check on cattle. I decided I would rather be alone than give up who I am." "I would never ask that of you," Tanner said. "If we got married, your ranch would still be yours. We could work it together, or you could keep running it yourself if you prefer. I am not looking for someone to give up their life for me. I am looking for someone to build a life with." The words were like a key turning in a lock Amelia had not even known existed. "You really mean that?" "I really do," Tanner said. He shifted closer to her on the blanket, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. "I know this is fast. I know you probably think I am out of my mind. But I have never been more certain of anything. You are who I have been looking for, Amelia. You are what I want." She should have pulled away. She should have been sensible and careful and protected her heart. Instead, she leaned into his touch and whispered, "I want that too. I am terrified, but I want it." Tanner's smile was brilliant. "Then marry me. Not because I almost died today, not because I am asking you to give anything up, but because I think we could be happy together, because I think we could build something beautiful. By morning." Amelia said, remembering his words from earlier. "That was what you said, marry me by morning." "I was not entirely coherent at the time," Tanner admitted. "We can take as long as you need. But I meant the sentiment. I do not want to wait. I have waited my whole life to find you." Amelia took a shaky breath. Every practical thought in her head was screaming at her to slow down, to be reasonable, to protect herself. But her heart, that traitorous organ, was singing the same melody she had used to calm the Stampede, and it was drowning out every objection. "All right," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." The kiss he gave her was gentle and sweet and filled with a promise that made her believe, for the first time in years, that she might not have to face the world alone anymore. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Tanner rested his forehead against hers. "I am the luckiest man alive," he said. "You know that, right?" "I think we might both be lucky," Amelia replied, and she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. They stayed by the creek until the moon was high, talking and kissing and planning a future that felt both impossible and inevitable. Tanner told her more about the property he wanted to buy, how they could combine it with her ranch to create something larger and more sustainable. Amelia talked about her dreams of breeding horses, of using her mother's gift to train animals that other people had given up on. They spoke of children, of the house they would build together, of growing old side by side. When Amelia finally rode home in the small hours of the morning, her heart was so full she thought it might burst. She lay in her bed as dawn broke, staring at the ceiling and trying to process the fact that her entire life had changed in the span of a single day. This morning she had been alone, resigned to a solitary existence. Tonight she was engaged to a man she had known for less than 24 hours, and somehow it felt more right than anything she had ever done. Tanner came to her ranch just after sunrise, and they rode into town together to see Reverend Thomas about arranging a wedding. The Reverend was a kindly man in his 60s who had known Amelia since she was a child, and he listened to their story with a mixture of surprise and delight. "This is quite sudden," he said mildly. "Are you both certain this is what you want?" "More certain than I have ever been about anything," Tanner said, taking Amelia's hand. "We know it seems impulsive," Amelia added, "but it feels right. It feels like this is what we are supposed to do." Reverend Thomas studied them for a long moment, then smiled. "I have been performing marriages for 30 years, and I have learned to trust my instincts about these things. You two have something special. I can see it in the way you look at each other. If you are sure this is what you want, I would be honored to marry you." "How soon can we do it?" Tanner asked. "Well, traditionally there would be a waiting period, time to post the banns and give people notice," the Reverend said. "But given the circumstances, and the fact that you are both of age and sound mind, I could perform the ceremony tomorrow if you wish. That would give you time to obtain a marriage license from the county clerk and gather any witnesses you might want present." Amelia looked at Tanner, her heart pounding. "Tomorrow?" "Unless you want to wait longer," Tanner said. "I will marry you whenever you are ready, whether that is tomorrow or next month or next year." But Amelia found that she did not want to wait. The decision had been made, the course set, and waiting would only give her time to second-guess herself. "Tomorrow," she said firmly. "Let us do it tomorrow." The next 36 hours passed in a blur. Amelia and Tanner rode to the county seat to obtain their marriage license, then returned to White Pine to spread the word and make preparations. The news traveled through the small town like wildfire, and opinions were divided. Some people thought it was wonderfully romantic, a whirlwind courtship worthy of a dime novel. Others thought they were both insane and predicted disaster. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the general store, was firmly in the romantic camp. When Amelia came in to buy fabric for a new dress, the older woman clasped her hands and smiled. "I think it is wonderful, dear. Life is too short to waste time when you have found the right person. Your mother would have approved, I think. She was always one to follow her heart." "I hope you are right," Amelia said, though doubt was beginning to creep in around the edges of her certainty. What if they were making a terrible mistake? What if the magic of that first day faded and they were left as strangers who had legally bound themselves together? Mrs. Henderson seemed to sense her uncertainty. "You are scared. That is natural. Marriage is a leap of faith, even when you have known someone for years. But I have seen the way that young man looks at you, and I have known you since you were born. You are both good people with good hearts. That is a strong foundation to build on." The wedding took place the following afternoon in the small church at the center of White Pine. Amelia wore a simple cream-colored dress she had sewn herself the night before, her dark hair loose around her shoulders the way Tanner had said he liked it. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers that one of the town children had picked for her, and she felt beautiful in a way she never had before. Tanner stood at the altar in a new suit, his hair neatly combed, the bandage gone from his forehead to reveal the small cut that was already healing. When Amelia walked down the aisle, his face lit up with such joy that she forgot to be nervous. This was right. This was where she was supposed to be. Charlie and Pete stood as witnesses, along with Mrs. Henderson and Dr. Hanson. The ceremony was simple and brief, traditional vows spoken in voices that trembled with emotion. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife and told Tanner he could kiss his bride, the small gathering erupted in applause. "Hello, Mrs. Zimmerman," Tanner whispered against her lips. "Hello, husband," Amelia whispered back, and the word felt like magic. They held a small reception at the hotel restaurant, where half the town showed up to wish them well and sample the cake Mrs. Henderson had baked. Amelia was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support, by the realization that despite keeping mostly to herself these past 5 years, she was still part of this community and they genuinely cared about her happiness. As evening fell, Tanner took her back to her ranch, which would now be their ranch. He had already moved his few belongings from his bunk at the double bar, and they had spent the previous evening making room for his things among hers. It felt strange and wonderful to see his clothes hanging next to her dresses, his boots by the door beside her own. "Are you happy?" Tanner asked as they stood on the porch, watching the sun set over the hills. "Terrified," Amelia admitted. "But yes, very happy." "Good," Tanner said, pulling her close, "because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." That night, in the bed that had been hers alone for 5 years, Amelia discovered what it meant to truly share her life with someone. Tanner was gentle and patient, taking his time despite his obvious desire, making sure she felt safe and cherished. When they finally came together, it was with a sense of rightness that brought tears to Amelia's eyes. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the moonlight, Tanner traced patterns on her bare shoulder and said, "Tell me I am not dreaming. Tell me this is real." "It is real," Amelia said, pressing a kiss to his chest. "We really did this. We got married 2 days after meeting. We are absolutely insane." "The best kind of insane," Tanner said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. The weeks that followed were an adjustment as they learned to navigate life as a married couple. There were moments of awkwardness as they figured out each other's rhythms and habits, small conflicts over things like who would cook dinner or how early to rise in the morning. But there were far more moments of joy and discovery, of learning that partnership could be both easier and more rewarding than either of them had imagined. Tanner threw himself into improving the ranch, mending fences that Amelia had not had time to fix, reinforcing the barn roof, building a new chicken coop that was twice the size of the old one. He moved with tireless energy, as if he was trying to prove himself worthy of the life they were building. Amelia had to finally sit him down and tell him to slow down before he exhausted himself. "You do not have to earn your place here," she said gently. "This is your home now. You belong here not because of what you do, but because of who you are." Tanner pulled her into his lap, burying his face in her hair. "I just want to take care of you. I want to make your life easier." "You do," Amelia assured him. "Every single day, but we are partners, remember? That means we take care of each other." True to his word, Tanner completed the purchase of the 500 acres he had been saving for, and they began the work of integrating the 2 properties. It was exhausting, endless labor, but it was also deeply satisfying. They worked side by side from dawn to dusk, building something that was truly theirs. Amelia began using her gift with animals more intentionally, seeking out horses that others had written off as too wild or too difficult. She would spend hours with them, singing softly, letting them learn to trust her voice and her touch. Tanner watched her work with an expression of awe that never quite faded, and he told her often that she was doing something extraordinary. "You have a gift," he said one evening as they watched a previously fractious mare eat calmly from Amelia's hand. "We should build on it. We could make a name for ourselves training problem horses. People would pay good money for what you can do." "I have never thought of it as a business," Amelia said slowly. "I just do it because I love it." "Then keep doing it because you love it," Tanner said. "But let us make it official. Zimmerman Ranch, specializing in horse training and cattle. What do you think?" Amelia considered it, then smiled. "I think it sounds perfect." Word spread quickly about Amelia's abilities, and soon people were bringing horses from all over the region for her to work with. Some were dangerous, having been abused or mistreated. Others were simply spirited and needed someone patient enough to understand them. Amelia took them all, and more often than not, she succeeded where others had failed. The money from the training business allowed them to expand the cattle operation and hire 2 ranch hands to help with the workload. Charlie and Pete both signed on, happy to work for Tanner again and curious about the woman who had tamed a Stampede. They proved to be hardworking and loyal, and Amelia came to think of them as part of the family. 6 months into their marriage, Amelia realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but she waited until she was certain before telling Tanner. She chose a quiet evening when they were alone on the porch, watching the stars come out. "I have something to tell you," she said, taking his hand. Tanner immediately looked concerned. "What is wrong?" "Are you all right?" "I am fine," Amelia said quickly. "Better than fine, actually. I am pregnant." The expression on Tanner's face went through several rapid changes: shock, disbelief, and then pure, incandescent joy. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Amelia said, laughing at his reaction. "In about 6 months, if I have calculated correctly." Tanner let out a whoop of excitement and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. When he finally set her down, there were tears in his eyes. "I cannot believe it. We are going to be parents." "You are going to be a mother." "And you are going to be a father," Amelia said, her own eyes stinging. "Are you happy about it?" "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Tanner said. He knelt down and pressed a kiss to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. I cannot wait to meet you." The pregnancy was not easy. Amelia suffered from terrible nausea in the early months, and as she grew larger, the physical work of running the ranch became more difficult. Tanner was constantly hovering, trying to get her to rest more, to do less, to let him handle everything. It drove Amelia crazy, even though she knew he meant well. "I am pregnant, not helpless," she snapped at him one day when he tried to stop her from mucking out a stall. "I can still work." "I know you can," Tanner said, holding up his hands in surrender, "but you do not have to. We have Charlie and Pete. Let them do the heavy lifting." "I will go insane if I just sit around doing nothing," Amelia said. "I need to be useful." They compromised, with Amelia focusing more on the horse training and less on the physical labor of the ranch. It was not perfect, but it allowed her to stay active without overdoing it. Tanner still worried constantly, but he learned to trust her judgment about what she could handle. In early spring of 1884, after 12 hours of labor that left them both exhausted, Amelia gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Tanner held his son for the first time with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face, and said, "He is perfect. You are perfect. I love you both so much." They named him Thomas after the reverend who had married them, and he had his father's amber eyes and his mother's dark hair. From the moment he was born, Thomas was the center of their world. Tanner was a devoted father, getting up in the middle of the night to help with feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours just staring at his son in wonder. "I never knew I could love anything this much," he said one night as he rocked Thomas to sleep. "It is almost frightening how much I love him, how much I love you." "I know," Amelia said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I feel the same way." As Thomas grew, it became clear that he had inherited his mother's gift with animals. By the time he was 2, he could calm fractious horses with a touch, and the chickens followed him around the yard like he was their leader. Amelia taught him the songs her mother had taught her, and Tanner built him a small saddle so he could ride along with them as they worked. Life on the ranch was good, better than either of them had dared to dream. The business was thriving, their reputation spreading throughout Nevada and into California. They bought more land, expanded the herd, built a larger house to accommodate their growing family. 2 years after Thomas was born, Amelia had a daughter they named Rose. who had her father's smile and her mother's stubborn streak. 3 years after that came another son, Jacob, who was quiet and serious but could make anyone laugh when he chose to. The children grew up strong and happy, learning to work the ranch alongside their parents. Thomas proved to be a natural horseman, inheriting not just his mother's gift, but also a deep understanding of how to train and care for the animals. Rose was fearless and independent, always ready to try something new or take on a challenge. Jacob was thoughtful and methodical, the one who planned ahead and thought through problems before acting. Tanner and Amelia watched their children grow with a mixture of pride and amazement. On quiet evenings, when the kids were in bed and they had the porch to themselves, they would sit together and marvel at the life they had built. "Do you ever regret it?" Tanner asked one night, 10 years after that fateful day when Amelia had calmed the Stampede. "Marrying me so quickly, taking such a crazy leap of faith." Amelia looked at him, at the silver starting to show in his dark hair, at the lines around his eyes that came from years of smiling, at the hands that had worked beside hers to build something beautiful. "Not for a single second," she said. "It was the best decision I ever made." "Even though everyone thought we were insane," Tanner said, smiling. "Especially because everyone thought we were insane," Amelia said. "We proved them wrong. We proved that sometimes you just know, and you have to trust that." "I knew the moment I saw you," Tanner said, pulling her close. "I knew you were mine and I was yours, and everything else was just details." "You always were a romantic," Amelia teased, but she was smiling. "Only with you," Tanner said, and kissed her with the same passion and tenderness he had shown on their wedding night. Over the years, the ranch continued to prosper. The Zimmerman name became synonymous with quality horses and skilled training. People came from hundreds of miles away to purchase animals that Amelia had worked with, knowing they were getting something special. The cattle operation flourished too, with Tanner's expertise and Charlie's decades of experience guiding every decision. Thomas grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, but with his mother's quiet intensity. At 19, he took on more responsibility for the horse training side of the business, proving to have an even stronger gift than Amelia. He could gentle the wildest Mustang in a fraction of the time it took anyone else, and his reputation began to rival his mother's. Rose, at 17, announced that she wanted to study veterinary medicine. It was an unusual choice for a woman, but Amelia and Tanner supported her ambition without hesitation. They arranged for her to apprentice with Dr. Hanson, who was getting older and welcomed the help. Rose threw herself into learning everything she could, determined to become the first female veterinarian in Nevada. Jacob, at 14, showed less interest in the ranch work and more in books and learning. He spent hours reading everything he could get his hands on, and it became clear that his future lay in a different direction. Tanner and Amelia encouraged this too, making plans to send him to school in Carson City when he was old enough. "We did well with them," Tanner said one evening as they watched their children gathered around the dinner table, laughing and arguing and being a family. "They are good people." "They are," Amelia agreed. "We are very lucky." "Not lucky," Tanner said. "Blessed." As they aged, Tanner and Amelia settled into a comfortable rhythm. They still worked the ranch together, though they had help now and did not push themselves quite as hard. They took time to enjoy the life they had built, to appreciate the small moments as much as the big ones. They traveled occasionally, visiting San Francisco and Sacramento, but they always returned home to White Pine with relief and gratitude. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Tanner arranged a surprise celebration. He gathered everyone who had been at their wedding, along with their children and grandchildren, for a party at the ranch. Mrs. Henderson, now in her 80s but still sharp as a tack, baked a cake identical to the one she had made for their reception. Charlie and Pete, both gray-haired now but still working, shared stories about the early days of the ranch. Reverend Thomas, retired but healthy, offered a blessing for the couple and their family. "I have to admit," the Reverend said with a twinkle in his eye, "when you two came to me wanting to get married after knowing each other for less than 2 days, I had some doubts. But I have never been happier to be proven wrong. You have built something remarkable here, not just in terms of land and livestock, but in terms of love and family. You are an inspiration to us all." Amelia felt tears prick her eyes as she looked around at the gathered crowd, at the life she and Tanner had created together. It had started with a stampede and a song, with a reckless proposal and an even more reckless acceptance, but it had grown into something solid and lasting and beautiful. That night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, Tanner and Amelia walked out to the creek where they had their first dinner together. The cottonwood trees were bigger now, their branches spreading wide, but the creek still burbled the same way and the stars still filled the sky with light. "You remember what I said to you that night?" Tanner asked, taking her hand. "You said a lot of things," Amelia said, smiling. "Most of them wildly romantic and slightly insane." "I told you I wanted to build something with you," Tanner said. "A home, a family, a life full of meaning, and we did it, Amelia. We really did it." "We did," Amelia agreed, "and I would do it all again in a heartbeat." Tanner pulled her close, and they swayed together under the stars. No music but the sound of the creek and the whisper of the wind through the cottonwoods. After a moment, Amelia began to sing, the same hymn she had used to calm the stampede all those years ago. Her voice was older now, not quite as strong, but still pure and clear and filled with power. Tanner joined in, his deeper voice harmonizing with hers, and together they sang about green pastures and still waters, about love and home and the blessings of a life well lived. When the song ended, they stood in silence, holding each other, complete. Years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, but also joy and growth. Thomas married a kind woman named Emma who shared his love of horses, and they gave Amelia and Tanner their first grandchildren, twin girls who inherited the family gift and could sing to calm any animal within hearing distance. Rose became a successful veterinarian, opening a practice in White Pine and serving ranchers throughout the region. Jacob went to college and became a teacher, eventually returning to White Pine to run the local school. The ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's management, with Tanner and Amelia gradually stepping back to let the younger generation take over. They spent their later years enjoying their grandchildren, traveling when they felt like it, and simply being together. The love that had sparked so quickly and burned so bright never dimmed. If anything, it grew deeper and more profound with each passing year. On a warm summer evening when Amelia was 68 and Tanner was 73, they sat together on the porch of the house they had built all those decades ago. Their bodies were older, marked by years of hard work and life lived fully, but their hands were still clasped together and their hearts still beat in sync. "Tell me," Amelia said, as she had asked so many times over the years, "do you regret asking me to marry you after knowing me for 3 hours?" "Never," Tanner said, as he always did. "It was the smartest thing I ever did, even if it was also the craziest." "I am glad you did not wait," Amelia said. "I am glad you were brave enough to say what you wanted when you wanted it." "I almost died that day," Tanner said thoughtfully. "But instead I started living. You gave me that, Amelia. You gave me everything." "We gave it to each other," Amelia corrected gently. "That is what partnership means." As the sun set over the hills of Nevada, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they sat together in comfortable silence. Around them was the evidence of a life well lived. The ranch they had built together, the family they had raised, the love that had sustained them through 46 years of marriage. It had started with a stampede and a song, with a wild proposal and a wilder acceptance, but it had become something lasting and true. The children and grandchildren gathered for dinner that evening, filling the house with noise and laughter and life. Amelia looked around the table at the faces of the people she loved most in the world and felt a contentment so deep it brought tears to her eyes. This was what she and Tanner had created, not just a successful ranch or a thriving business, but a family bound together by love and commitment and shared history. After dinner, as was their custom, someone asked Amelia to tell the story of how she and Tanner met. The grandchildren had heard it dozens of times, but they never tired of it. Amelia obliged, describing the stampede and the desperate ride and the song that saved lives. She talked about Tanner's proposal, about how crazy it had seemed and how right it had felt, about the leap of faith they had both taken. "The important thing," she said, looking at each of the young faces around her, "is not that we knew each other for such a short time before getting married. It is that we were both brave enough to recognize something special when we saw it, and committed enough to work every single day to make it last. Love is not just a feeling. It is a choice you make, over and over again, to put another person first and to build a life together." "Did you ever doubt it?" one of the twins asked. "Did you ever wonder if you made a mistake?" "Never about your grandfather," Amelia said firmly. "There were times when things were hard, when money was tight or the work was overwhelming or we disagreed about something important. But I never once doubted that we were meant to be together. That certainty made everything else bearable." Tanner reached over and squeezed her hand. "The same for me," he said. "Your grandmother was and is the love of my life. Everything good in my existence came from that moment when I looked up and saw her riding toward me, singing like an angel. I knew then, and I know now, that she saved me in more ways than one." The evening wore on, filled with more stories and laughter and the comfortable chaos of a large family gathering. Eventually, people began to drift away, the children and grandchildren heading to their own homes, until only Amelia and Tanner remained. They walked out to the porch one more time, as they did every night, to look at the stars and breathe in the cool evening air. The ranch was quiet now, settled in for the night, and in the distance, they could hear the soft lowing of cattle and the occasional whinny of a horse. "It has been a good life," Tanner said softly. "Better than I ever dreamed possible. The best," Amelia agreed. "And it is not over yet. We still have time." "All the time in the world," Tanner said, pulling her close. "And I plan to spend every second of it loving you." They stood together under the vast Nevada sky. Two people who had taken the wildest gamble of their lives and won beyond their most ambitious hopes. The stampede that had brought them together was long past, but the love it had sparked burned as bright as ever, a beacon that had guided them through nearly 5 decades of life shared and cherished. Inside the house, photographs chronicled their journey. Young and fresh-faced on their wedding day, standing proudly in front of the expanded ranch, holding their babies, surrounded by children and grandchildren at various celebrations. Each image told part of the story, but the whole was so much greater than the sum of its parts. It was a story of courage and commitment, of two souls recognizing each other across the chaos of a moment and choosing to build something lasting. As the years continued to unfold, Amelia and Tanner remained the heart of their family. They watched grandchildren grow into adults, attended weddings and graduations, welcomed great-grandchildren into the world. The ranch passed fully into Thomas's capable hands, but Amelia still worked with horses when the spirit moved her, and Tanner still rode out to check on the cattle, needing to stay connected to the life they had built. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the family threw a massive celebration that brought people from all over the state. Former students of Jacob's came to pay their respects. Ranchers whose horses Amelia had trained made the journey to White Pine. Old friends and neighbors, some using canes and walkers now, gathered to honor the couple who had become something of a legend in the region. The story of the Stampede had grown in the telling over the years, becoming part of local folklore. People spoke of the woman who could calm animals with her voice, of the cowboy who proposed after 3 hours and built a 50-year marriage from that impulsive decision. Young couples would come to Amelia and Tanner for advice, hoping to find the secret to a love that lasted. "There is no secret," Amelia would tell them. "You choose each other every day, you work hard, you communicate, you forgive. You build something together that is bigger than either of you alone, and if you are very lucky, you find someone who makes all of that feel not like work, but like joy." The celebration lasted well into the night, with music and dancing and endless stories. Thomas gave a speech about his parents that left hardly a dry eye in the house. Rose presented them with a leather-bound journal filled with letters from everyone whose lives they had touched. Jacob coordinated a slideshow of photographs that chronicled their 5 decades together. When it was finally just the two of them again, exhausted but happy, Amelia and Tanner retreated to the quiet of their bedroom. They sat together on the edge of the bed they had shared for 50 years, holding hands, marveling at the journey they had taken. 50 years, Tanner said wonderingly. "When I asked you to marry me by morning, I never imagined we would make it this far." "I think part of me knew," Amelia said. "Even when I told myself you were crazy, even when I was terrified of what I was doing, part of me knew we would be together forever." "Forever is not long enough," Tanner said, and even at 78, he could still make her heart flutter with the intensity of his love. They lived several more years in relative peace and happiness, their bodies aging but their spirits remaining strong. They were surrounded by family, supported by a community that loved them, content in the knowledge that they had lived fully and loved deeply. When Tanner passed away at the age of 82, peaceful in his sleep with Amelia beside him, the whole town mourned. He was laid to rest in the White Pine Cemetery, and Amelia sang over his grave the same hymn she had used to calm the Stampede all those years ago. Her voice was thinner now, worn by age, but it still carried the same power and love it always had. Amelia lived another 4 years without him, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who made sure she was never alone. She spent her days on the porch of the ranch house, watching the life she and Tanner had built continue without them, satisfied that they had created something that would endure. She spoke often of Tanner, keeping his memory alive with stories and laughter rather than tears. She told her great-grandchildren about the day they met, about the Stampede and the song and the wild proposal that changed everything. She wanted them to know that love was worth taking chances for, that sometimes the craziest decisions turned out to be the wisest ones. On a warm summer evening very much like the one when she had first met Tanner, Amelia passed away quietly in her sleep. She was buried beside her husband, and the whole town turned out once more to pay their respects to a woman who had become a legend in her own right. The Zimmerman Ranch continued to thrive under the management of the next generation, and then the one after that. The story of Amelia and Tanner became part of the family legacy, told and retold to each new child born into the clan. The gift of calming animals with voice and touch continued to appear in descendants, a reminder of the extraordinary woman who had started it all. Years later, a historical society in Nevada would commission a plaque to be placed at the site where the stampede had occurred, commemorating the day when a brave woman had ridden toward danger and found love instead. The inscription read, "On this site in 1883, Amelia Garrett calmed a stampede with nothing but her voice." Tanner Zimmerman proposed that same day, and they married within 48 hours. Their 54-year marriage and the family they built became the foundation of the Zimmerman Ranch, still operating today. This monument stands as a testament to the power of courage, love, and taking chances on what feels right. The story of their love became a touchstone for the community, proof that sometimes the most impulsive decisions could lead to the most lasting happiness. Young couples would visit the site on their wedding days, hoping to capture some of the magic that Amelia and Tanner had found. Old married couples would come to remember their own early days, inspired by a love story that had started with such drama and ended with such contentment. The ranch itself became a destination for those interested in natural horsemanship and animal training, with trainers coming from around the world to learn the techniques that Amelia had developed and her descendants had refined. The Zimmerman method, as it came to be known, was based on the principle that animals responded to genuine connection and calm authority, that voice and touch and patience could achieve what force never could. In the ranch house, preserved as it had been when Amelia and Tanner lived there, visitors could see the simple life they had built together. The photographs on the walls, the worn furniture they had used, the kitchen where Amelia had cooked beans and biscuits for her family, the porch where they had spent countless evenings watching the sunset. It was not grand or impressive in the way of mansions or monuments, but it radiated something more valuable, the warmth of a life well lived and a love well tended. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried forward the values Amelia and Tanner had instilled: hard work, integrity, commitment to family, and the courage to take chances when your heart told you something was right. The family grew and spread, with branches in different states and different pursuits, but they all traced their lineage back to that fateful day in 1883 when a stampede brought two souls together. The legacy of Amelia and Tanner Zimmerman was not just the successful ranch, or the techniques for training horses, or the historical plaque, or the stories told by the family. It was the simple but profound truth that love was the greatest adventure of all, that finding the right person and building a life with them required both courage and commitment, that sometimes you had to trust your heart even when your head said you were crazy. They had proven that love at first sight was not just the stuff of fairy tales and dime novels, but something real and powerful that could sustain a lifetime of partnership. They had shown that marriage was not about grand gestures or perfect moments, but about choosing each other every single day through the good times and the hard times and all the ordinary moments in between. Their story reminded everyone who heard it that life was too short to waste time on fear and doubt, that when you found something worth fighting for, you grabbed it with both hands and held on tight. They had taken the wildest gamble, marrying after 3 hours of acquaintance, and they had won beyond measure because they had been willing to do the work, to communicate and compromise and choose love over pride. The small cemetery in White Pine where they rested side by side became a place of pilgrimage for romantics and dreamers, for people who wanted to believe that true love still existed in a cynical world. Fresh flowers appeared on their graves regularly, left by visitors who had been touched by their story or by descendants who wanted to honor the couple who had started it all. On quiet evenings, when the wind blew through the cottonwood trees by the creek where they had first shared dinner, locals swore they could sometimes hear singing. It was Amelia's voice, they said, still pure and clear and filled with love, singing the hymn that had stopped a stampede and started a legacy. Whether it was truth or legend or simply the wind playing tricks, it did not really matter. What mattered was that the story lived on, inspiring new generations to be brave enough to follow their hearts. The Zimmerman Ranch stood as a living monument to what two people could build when they trusted each other and worked together toward a common dream. From that first impulsive proposal to 54 years of marriage to the generations of family that followed, it was a testament to the enduring power of love chosen and nurtured and protected. Amelia and Tanner's story proved that sometimes the best things in life came from the craziest decisions, that sometimes you had to leap before you looked, that sometimes 3 hours was enough time to recognize your soulmate. They had lived boldly and loved deeply, and in doing so, they had created something that would last far beyond their own lifetimes. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not the land they had accumulated or the success they had achieved, but the love they had shared and the family they had raised and the example they had set. They had shown that marriage was not always easy, but it was always worth it when you found the right person. They had proven that commitment and communication and choosing each other every single day could create a foundation strong enough to weather any storm. Their descendants continued to tell their story, embellishing it slightly with each generation but always keeping the core truth intact. That Amelia had calmed a stampede with her voice, that Tanner had proposed within hours of meeting her, that they had taken a chance on love and built something beautiful that lasted a lifetime and beyond. It was a story about courage and faith, about recognizing something special when you saw it, and being brave enough to reach for it even when it seemed insane. It was about two imperfect people who had found in each other the perfect partner, who had built a life of meaning and purpose and deep, abiding love. And so the legend lived on, passed down through generations, inspiring others to be bold in love and brave in life, to trust their instincts and take chances and believe that sometimes, against all odds and conventional wisdom, 3 hours really was enough time to know that you had found forever.